Wow. Well, welcome everybody. Hope everyone had a great week, and we're going to end this week on a great note as you're all here to embrace what we're going to be talking about today, understanding the explosion of artificial intelligence, brought to you by Glorium Technologies. And again, if you are new, welcome. And for those that have been with us in the past, again, we always welcome you back. And again, it's because of you why we put on these summits to create more value, not only the value itself, but what you do with it to move your business forward with this content as we bring in subject matter experts from around the world. There is a message box over here to the right. Again, we'd love to see your messages there as they come in. We'll make sure that our subject matter expert will be addressing those questions later. I'll be stating those questions from the message box so that way we can get those answered for you. And again, what you're going to be getting from this session today is you're going to understand how advancements in AI are transforming everyday life, from self-driving cars to predictive text and facial recognition, how its impact is accelerating now, despite the foundational algorithms being developed decades ago. And you're going to learn about the key factors of enabling the AI explosion, including advancements in computing power, data availability, and cloud resources. And I can keep going on and on and on. We got the right person here with us today. We have Dr. Michael Hausman. And before I introduce him, I'm going to give you a little background about him. He's the CEO and founder of AL Accelerator. He is a technologist and data scientist who sits at the intersection of artificial intelligence and human psychology. He has spent 15 years leading technology teams at early stage companies, having architected platforms to hire job applicants, communicate more effectively with customers, catch fraudsters, and transact real estate. His research has been published in a variety of peer-reviewed journals, presented at a dozen of academic and practitioner-oriented conferences, and profiled by such media outlets as the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, The Economist, and The Atlantic. Dr. Hausman received his AM and PhD in Applied Economics and Managerial Science from the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania and his AB from Harvard University. Very impressive, and we look forward to bringing Dr. Michael Hausman on. Hi, Dr. Hausman.
Hey, Chris, how's it going?
Doing great. What a great way to end the week, and we are looking forward to your presentation, and it's all yours.
Yeah, thanks so much. Very excited to be here. So I'm going to share my screen. Hold on one second. And can everyone see my screen?
We can't see it yet. We just see you, but
okay.
Here we go. Now we can.
There we go.
Yes.
All right. You guys see it now?
Yes, we can.
Cool. So yeah, I'm here. I want to talk about the past, present, and future of AI and really dig in to understand the explosion that we're experiencing right now. And to do that, I often like to level set. Let's go in our time machines and let's go back in time 30 years. In 1993, Mosaic was the first web browser. It emerged. It connects all the world's information to our fingertips. It was followed by Chrome and Internet Explorer, Safari, Firefox. And let's take a second and think about all the changes that have occurred in our lives because of the internet, right? The way we consume information, the way we connect with others, the way we're able to communicate. And I bring this up because that was the first digital disruption. And then 20 years ago, we saw the advent of social media. So it started with companies like Flickr, YouTube, and Dig, for those of us like Chris, old enough to remember, and it's been superseded by TikTok and Instagram and Facebook. And social media has really allowed us to make the world smaller, to connect, to form communities with friends, with colleagues, with strangers, right? And it's completely upended our lives. And again, I bring it up because that's the second digital disruption. And all of these have paved the way for a third digital disruption that we're experiencing right now. It's AI. The hallmark tools are ChatGPT and DALL-E 3, Sora, Stable Diffusion, Claude. And the experts, when they look at these three, that they all agree that this third digital disruption is going to blow us all away. So that's the magnitude of what we're facing right now. And I think that's why everyone's tuning in. And so I generally like to break these down into three chunks. Let's first unpack AI. Let's talk about some of the foundational models that are changing the game. Let's do a little bit of shock and awe about the state of the art. Then I want to make it more practical. How are companies leveraging these tools right now? Where are there massive opportunities that are hiding in plain sight to leverage these tools to, jumpstart and kind of charge ahead of the competition? And then third, what's on the horizon? We're going to see some disruptions. How do you future-proof yourself? How do you become the Netflix of your industry and not the Blockbuster? So first, let's talk about AI. And I like to tell everyone, really, AI at its core is pattern recognition. It's looking at a big pile of data, forming a model of what patterns exist in the data, and then applying it to new data. And so the two of the models that I really want to highlight, we have a limited amount of time, but there are two models that I think are really driving forward all of this innovation. And one of them is called the generative adversarial network. And don't worry, I won't share any math with you, but what's a GAN? A GAN is what allows us to build AI art. And that's image, video, audio. This is a piece of artwork you're looking at right now. It was submitted to a Denver art show a couple years ago. It won first prize. Then the submitter revealed, hey, this is AI art. And we've started to see that across social media. We're seeing it all over the place. The original tool that developed this was DALL-E 3, which was built by OpenAI. They fed it millions of images and captions and taught it to reverse engineer images from the captions. And so you can go to DALL-E right now in ChatGPT and say, hey, show me avocados dancing, drinking, and singing at a Hawaiian luau. And generate something like this. It can be historical. You can say, I want to see a medieval painting of the Wi-Fi not working, and you'll get something like on the right. Folks ask, well, why DALL-E 3 or 4? What happened to DALL-E 1 and 2? So DALL-E 1, these models are constantly improving. DALL-E 1 and 2 were really bad at context. So if you said DALL-E 1, show me Mother Teresa fighting poverty, you get something like this on the right, which I think is kind of amusing. And now we're seeing Sora. And in fact, Sora has a V2 that was just released to advanced ChatGPT customers. And so you can go to Sora right now and say, hey, I want to see a stylish woman walking down a Tokyo street with warm, glowing neon and animated signage. And you'll see something like this. It's visually stunning. And it's pretty remarkable what these tools are enabling, the sort of creativity. But what it allows us to do is build AI artwork. I promise you, Chris and everyone else, I have zero artistic ability whatsoever. And yet I'm able to build a model of myself and then create some fantastic art, put me on a movie poster, really create. It's enabled all of us to be creators. It's democratized the tools that previously existed in the hands of a few. So how does it work? Well, I mentioned it's called a generative adversarial network, also called a GAN, and it's based on a very simple concept. You have two algorithms, and they play a game against each other. There's a generator. Its job is to create images or audio or videos that are as realistic as possible that are realistic and indistinguishable from the real thing. And then you have a discriminator. Its job is to look at images and audio and video from the generator and say, okay, this one's real and that one's fake. And they play this game iteratively, billions and billions of times. And the generator learns from feedback. So you might start and say, hey, generator, make me a face. And on day 0 or 1, you'll end up with something very pixelated and grainy, like what you see on the right-hand side. But the point is it learns from feedback the same way that an artist would learn from feedback. And over time, it gets better and better and better until it's able to create faces that are photorealistic, that are indistinguishable from the real thing. So what are real world applications of this? Well, something I've been saying for years is synthetic data is going to be a game changer. Now, what's that mean? I was a chief technology officer for a company for a number of years that does fraud detection for large banks. So part of my job was to go to chief data officers at banks and say, hey, we're going to find all the fraudulent loan applications in your data. All I need you to do is cough up all your customer records with phone numbers, names, addresses, social security numbers. That's a very uncomfortable conversation to have with a chief data officer. Imagine, if you will, instead of doing that, I go to that same chief data officer and I say, listen, take your customer data, keep it in your sandbox, run it through an algorithm. The algorithm is going to create a copy of that data with all these same intrinsic properties, but that data won't have any personally identifiable information. The names, the addresses, the phone numbers, social security numbers, they're all fake. That's a data set you can email me. And so I think everyone's out there saying, hey, play with text to image and video and audio. That's all great. I'm telling you that synthetic data is the one an application that's creating a ton of enterprise value right now. Now, sadly, the tools that get in the hands of good guys also get in the hands of the bad guys. And so a friend of mine got a call from her son the other day. It was a voicemail message, said, Mom, I'm in jail. I need you to wire money to an account. Sounded kind of suspicious. Turns out that fraudsters had gotten his outbound voicemail message, cloned his voice, and were leaving this voicemail on various family members' voicemails in order to see if someone would bite. It was a phishing scheme. And so, it's sad that we have to be very cautious with deep fakes and clones becoming so easy to create right now. And then I also wanted to highlight large language models, right? These are the tools we're all playing with on a day-to-day basis. How's a large language model work? How do we build one? Well, imagine you wanted to build an LLM off the works of Charles Dickens, and you take his books and you'd feed it to a big matrix, and you'd say, after any given letter, probabilistically, what's the letter that comes next? Then you take that table of probabilities, you'd spin this stochastic wheel, and then you'd start filling it in letter by letter. You'd have an S, you update the table, spin the wheel, have a T, update the table, spin the wheel. And you do this over and over again until you were replicating his language. So it turns out that gets you so-so results. What gets you really good results is not benchmarking on the last letter, but on all previous words and phrases. And we feed that information to a giant brain called a neural net. And when we do that, that's when we get remarkably close to the language of Charles Dickens. Two changes to get from that to what we all experience in ChatGPT. Number one, we don't train on Dickens. We train on the entire internet, all books ever written. There's a reason it's called a large language model. And two, we don't predict the letter. We actually predict a token. A token could be a fragment of a word. It could be a piece of code. But this is completely changing the game across various industries. Amazon, a number of months ago, said, we're going to limit the number of self-published books that appear in our marketplace to 3 per day. So 3 books per day. That's how much AI-generated content is making its way onto Amazon. And in a kind of crazy Black Mirror-ish application, I'll talk about, there are companies like Character AI and Replica that allow you to create virtual personas. And so you can go on Character right now, you can interact with virtual Elon Musk. You can talk to a virtual psychologist. I've consulted a virtual speech coach. And in fact, the founder of Replica built the application because she had lost a very close friend of hers to a car accident. Now, her friend Luca had a deep digital footprint. So that meant there were tons of emails and tweets and messages and texts that she was able to capture. She fed it to an LLM. She was then able to recreate his personality digitally. And so I hate to say it, these are applications and questions that we'll all have to answer. If you've lost a loved one, if that person has a deep digital footprint, there's a world where you're going to be able to communicate with that person posthumously. Is that something you want to do? That's something that we'll all have the option of doing very soon. And now I think one of the most exciting applications of LLMs and AI is the emergence of multimodal models. And what that means is think about how you learn information, right? And how you synthesize it. Are you just going and reading everything you can on books and on the internet? Probably not. You're probably going to Spotify. You're probably listening to podcasts. You're probably watching YouTube clips. You might even be looking at tabular data. And so the point is, we're starting to see models that collate and combine information streams from these various sources. And so a couple applications, Google's Astra project can synthesize textual, image, audio, and video information to interact with the user in real time. Here's a sample, and tell me if you don't hear the sound.
What is that part of the speaker called?
That is the tweeter. It produces high-frequency sounds.
Chris, are you guys hearing the sound? I'll keep going. I think what we're likely to see is education become highly personalized, highly customized. It's going to speak to the student in the language in which he or she wants to learn. So this is Saul Khan. He created Khan Academy. Next to him is his son. And what we're going to launch is an AI teaching his son trigonometry.
Well, looking at the triangle, which side do you think is the hypotenuse?
Really,
Remember the hypotenuse?
I'm not totally sure. I think it might be this one, but I really am not sure. This side AC.
You're close.
So really exciting stuff on the horizon. So given that we've gotten a little glimpse of where AI is, where it's headed, let's talk now about how people and how companies can leverage these tools, how they can capture these massive opportunities that I say are hiding in plain sight. So first off, I'm a social scientist by training. I've published lots of journal articles, and the research is in and it's unanimous. These tools are productivity game changers. So this is research out of Harvard, Stanford, and Morton. It took consultants, gave them 18 realistic consulting tasks. Half of them got access to an LLM, half of them did not. The half with access to an LLM were more productive, they're more efficient, and they produce higher quality. Same results were replicated with front office workers. This is research out of MIT. Same results. They took front office workers, divided them in half, gave half an LLM. They were more productive, more efficient, higher quality. Copilot Chat, which is a developer tool, took on this same study, looked at developers, gave half of them access to Copilot Chat, and found that they were actually 2x more productive in terms of completing specific tasks. Not only that, their code was higher quality and it was less buggy. So the question I get most often when I talk about AI is, am I going to lose my job? And the answer that I like to give is, you're not going to lose your job, but your job may lose you. And let me explain what I mean by that. We're seeing AI make its way into the workplace in a variety of different capacities. We're seeing the AI that's making its way into the OR, into warehouses and factories, into self-driving cars, obviously, and even into restaurants. And folks worry about job loss, but this is a conversation that we've been having for decades. In the 1920s, there were hundreds of thousands of switchboard operators that were effectively running the telephone system. They were the backbone of this telecommunication system. It was a largely female workforce. And so at the time, in the 20s, we saw the emergence of an automated switchboard that effectively took over this job. And at the time, folks were worried and they kind of said, hey, what's going to happen to these women? They're all going to lose their job. And the truth is, some did, in fact, exit the workforce. But that same technology that paved the way for the automated switchboard. Oh, by the way, here are articles that came out that said, hey, this technology is going to eliminate these jobs. But that same technology that paved the way for the automated switchboard also created modern telecommunications. It created the data center, created software engineering, created hardware engineering. So my point is, while these technologies do change jobs, jobs are constantly in a state of evolution. Folks need to retrain and reskill themselves to handle those jobs. And while some jobs will be eliminated because of AI, there are countless more, exponential more jobs that will be created because of AI. What's a job that exists now that didn't exist just 3 years ago? Well, what about prompt engineer? This is a job listing from Anthropic for a prompt engineer and librarian. The pay is $300,000 a year. So clearly I'm in the wrong line of work. And so it's exciting that this is a job that didn't exist three years ago. It exists now. It's one of the fastest growing roles in the US. And so the point is, it's incumbent on all of us to take the opportunity to learn how to do our jobs, how to be the best at it, and to recognize that our jobs are going to look different in 5 or 10 years from what they look like now. So I mentioned that research because the evidence suggests that these tools are productivity game changers. What they do at their core is they scale intelligence. And that's especially relevant for knowledge workers. And so what I'm seeing is that companies with lots and lots of knowledge workers are engaging in what I call a generative AI arms race. And so, for example, a year and a half ago, PwC said, we're going to make $1 billion with a B dollar investment in AI. EY, a company I do a lot of work with, came back and said, well, guess what? We have made, past tense, a 1.4 billion investment in AI. EY responded earlier this year and said, you know what? Well, we're OpenAI's largest ChatGPT enterprise customer. And EY comes back and says, we don't care because we're best friends with Microsoft. So the point is, we're seeing this kind of one-upsmanship, this generative AI arms race occurring in the marketplace, and you can feel it, right? You're seeing all this race towards AI, and folks and companies are really just throwing money at these technologies. And from my vantage point, what I see companies doing is looking across all the different silos of their employees and saying, how can I put these tools in the hands of my employees to supercharge their productivity, to make them hyper productive, to produce higher quality? They're looking at learning and development, at procurement, at risk and compliance, at data and analytics, and they're looking at AI-enabled tools that can help them get an edge. And it's funny that the tool that Microsoft has embedded in its Office suite is called Copilot, because Copilot is actually an aviation term. If you looked in the cockpit of an airplane in the 1920s, you would have seen something like this. And the point is that flying in the 20s was a very manual process. It was entirely done by humans. And in fact, it was physically exhausting. By the 1950s, I call it machine assisted. And that means you have lightweight navigation systems and various other systems to point the pilot in the right direction, but pilots are still doing most of the work. By the 1980s, it's flipped. It's not machine assisted, it's human assisted. And that means that human beings are doing most of the work, and machines are doing most of the work, especially in the middle, and humans are really just helping with takeoff and landing. And now we're in an era where flight is entirely automated. And that's why drones exist. The truth is, we like having humans in the cockpit. We feel better when they're there, but we don't really need them there. And ultimately, machines can take off, fly, and land on their own. So let's look at that, not for flying, but for other tasks like diagnosing diseases and driving vehicles, writing reports and articles, making hiring decisions, or credit and lending decisions. The truth is, in the 1950s, all of these roles start in a very manual process. They're entirely human-driven. But in the 60s and 70s, we started to see some migration upwards towards more and more machine assistance. By the 80s and 90s, we're starting to see digital technologies automate more and more of these jobs. In the 2000s, almost everything has machine assistance. I think in the 2020s, we're going to see more human assistant roles. And in the 2030s, this is speculative, I think we're going to see a combination of entirely automated and human assisted tasks. And that's why Sam Altman said a year ago, hey, we're going to see in our lifetimes a one-person unicorn. That's a one-person company worth $1 billion, because these jobs are so automated that all you need is a conductor at the top of this AI orchestra to point them in the right direction and to drive strategy. So I like to tell stories from my own career. Let me tell you a story from a company that I've engaged with called Pet Lab, and they're the leading pet supplement maker. So think of like probiotic chews for your dog or cat. And we kind of looked at all of their processes, and they said, hey, we think AI has an opportunity to transform our business. We want to get ahead of this thing. And so we looked at all their processes and pulled them apart and said, hey, how can AI really help them? And specifically, they're an e-commerce company. E-commerce companies are all about launching and testing campaigns. The winners are usually the ones that do that the fastest. So we looked at that process of launching and testing campaigns. And it's really about creating content, launch the campaign, gather feedback. And you turn the crank on this virtuous cycle over and over and over again. And so we wanted to ask, well, how can generative AI make that process better, faster, cheaper? And specifically, it was the content creation process that seemed to be the slowest and the most clunky and cumbersome. And so this was an ad that would have appeared for them in November of 2022. We looked at some off-the-shelf tools that their designers and marketers could use. For example, looking at Midjourney, taking a Midjourney image and going in there and saying, hey, we want a Coke can with a bright blue skyline. And then we pick one. Okay, let's find a Labrador with a bright blue skyline. Great, let's pick one. Have a photo, choose one of those cans, chop it in half, replace it with some Pet Lab products, add the dog in the background, pop it into Photoshop, and this was the result. So the outcome were visually stunning ads. Their marketers were really able to flex their creative muscles and had a little fun, you can see on the right, with their Halloween kind of approach. But so they went from this to this. But what's even more exciting is that not only did these ads perform better, not only did they resonate more with customers, but their velocity went through the roof. Prior to these tools, they spent an average of 40-45 minutes per campaign. They were able to get that down to about 5 to 10 minutes. That means that the number of campaigns they launched per month wasn't 500, it became 2,300. And so with that additional velocity, this is their revenue year over year in 2023. And you can see once we kind of crack that nut, you see that growth in that line. They really became a juggernaut in their space and are now the largest pet supplement company in the world. Now, there's a challenge. That's the opportunity. That's the value. There's a challenge to doing this. And I'll illustrate that by way of a kind of story. So ChatGPT went viral on a level we've never seen before. It got to 100 million users in 2 months, faster than TikTok, faster than Instagram, faster than Telegram, faster than Spotify. But what happened to long-term engagement, right? What happened to 1 month retention, daily and monthly active users? So this is 1 month retention amongst for non-AI native applications and daily and monthly active users. You see it's pretty high. Once you jump on WhatsApp and Instagram and YouTube, you tend to come back pretty often. What do you think happened to AI first applications? The answer is engagement drops off a cliff. This is 1 month retention for AI first companies. This is daily and monthly active users. So there's a reason why folks for AI first applications that get on there, they play around, but they tend not to stick. And the reason is really that it takes time. These tools are not meant to be consumed passively. They actually require a change in your workflow, in your routines, and your day-to-day behaviors. And so by way of example, this is Pet Lab. And, you know, along the way, I was given a role of interim CTO, and there were 20 developers that were matrixed up. And so at some point, there was an emergence of Copilot Chat, which is a game changer for productivity for developers. It allows you to build out unit tests and simple functions in record time. And so I thought it'd be very easy to get developers to use a tool that really enhanced their productivity. And it was not. We started with the carrots. We started with brown bags and innovation awards. We tried to incentivize them to really lean into these applications. And the truth is, even after all that, we got only about a third of the developers to lean in. Then we moved on to the sticks. And we made them mandatory. We baked them into the performance evaluations, right? We looked over their shoulder and monitored GitHub commits and statistics. And even then, we only got another third of the developer core. And then finally, we got the rest of the developers when I said in a meeting verbatim, you won't be replaced by AI, but you might be replaced by someone who knows how to use AI. We baked it into position descriptions that we put out. We made sure that folks were using it when they completed our coding tests. And that's when everyone got on board. So I say all this to emphasize, look, at the end of the day, technology is often the easiest part. It's people and change management that's the hard part. And the companies that I see doing the best at this are investing 3 to 5x in the people, in the retraining and the reskilling of the workforce, whatever they've paid for in terms of technology. So we talked about those massive opportunities hiding in plain sight. Let's talk about how to future-proof yourself. How do you be Netflix and not Blockbuster? And what I mean by that is think about, remember we saw this slide at the very beginning. These are the 3 digital disruptions. The question and the way that I see everyone approaching AI is by taking these tools, putting them in their hands of their employees, and having to supercharging their productivity. The question I don't see any companies asking really out there is, how is this going to disrupt my space? Who's going to come along and eat my lunch, right? How do I need to worry about technology completely upending my business model? For example, 30 years ago, the internet emerged. And at that time, would you have believed me if I told you that Blockbuster was going to disappear off the face of the earth? Taxi cab companies were going to get crushed. Barnes & Noble was going to really struggle. 20 years ago, we saw social media. Who would have believed then that newspaper companies would have their business model completely upended? Telecom was going to really struggle and have to adapt. Try to find a Kodak camera or a Virgin record store. And I usually use this opportunity to brainstorm with live audience. Well, who's going to get disrupted in an era of AI? Who needs to be really, really nervous right now that someone's going to come and eat their lunch? And I think it's speculative, right? We're the first inning of this process, but I think content creators like Disney need to really sit up, pay attention, and lean into these technologies. I think firms with lots of knowledge workers, like lawyers, like accountants, like consultants, like auditors, they need to be focused on how they can leverage these tools. I think book publishers, I think education institutions, all of them need to be very cognizant of what's happening. And I think some of the most exciting advancements right now are in the realm of multimedia, right? The way it's changing the way we create media. I think movies, I think TV, I think music, I think advertising is going to completely transform. This is work from Tim Adder, and he specializes in AI-generated modeling shots. And imagine when you want to take an advert out online or in a magazine, you have to you have to pay a photographer, you have to find a model, you have to rent equipment, you have to rent a studio. Now imagine you can create an AI-generated modeling shot for fractions of a penny using just AI models, right? And so this is going to be a game changer for advertising and media. So I've given this talk a few times, and once along the way, a friend of mine in the audience, he worked for Disney. He grabbed me afterwards and he said, listen, Mike, all due respect to your AI models, but Disney's been making movies for hundreds of years, for 100 years. There's a ton of production value that goes into those movies. There's no way AI is going to really be able to make a dent. And we're never going to see an AI movie in our lifetime. So let's put a pin in that, and I'll tell you a story. In 1980, AT&T heard about this thing called the cell phone, and it posed an existential risk to their business model. So they commissioned a study from Kinsey with a simple question, which is how many cell phones are there going to be in circulation in the year 2000? McKinsey went and they did a bunch of research and they collated the data, came back to AT&T and said, good news, the cell phone isn't going to be a thing. There are only going to be 900,000 handsets in the year 2000. Turns out they were off by an order of 200. There were 200 million handsets in the year 2000. It's a black eye from McKinsey-ites. Apologies if any of them are on the line. And the question is, well, why were they so far off? The answer is because they were asking the wrong question. Cell phones didn't look like this in the year 1980. Cell phones looked like this. So they were asking the wrong question. They want to know how many of these things would be around in the year 2000. And not many. No one wants one of these, but everyone wants one of these. And the point of this story is technology doesn't proceed linearly. It proceeds exponentially, like Moore's law. Midjourney images. If you've gone to Midjourney 2.5 years ago and said, hey, give me an image of a woman with a shawl on it, you'd get something like this in February of 2022. This is the image by April, July, November. Here's March, May, August, and December. So look at the evolution of these images. This is how quickly AI is getting better and better and more robust. And I mentioned text to video. We're now starting to see shorts with text to video tools. So this is a short called Airhead. It was created entirely using Sora, and I mentioned before. And so let's watch.
Well, they say everyone has something unique about them, something that sets them apart. It's just in my case, it's quite obvious what that thing is. I am literally filled with hot air. Yeah, living like this has its challenges. Windy days, for one, are particularly troublesome. Or there was the one time my girlfriend insisted I go to the cactus store to get my Uncle Jerry a wedding present. Ugh.
Amazing, right? So I mentioned before, well, what's the way you avoid getting disrupted? And the answer is by disrupting your own space. And IKEA is running some really interesting experiments to disrupt their own business model. So let's unpack that and let's understand, well, what are they doing? It starts with new business approaches. And so specifically, they're looking at algorithmic design for their furniture. So what you're looking at are algorithmic chairs that were designed by AI. Some of them will never see the light of day. Some of them aren't even sittable. But the point is now their designers don't have to think about creation. They think about curation. They look at these designs and say, which of these fit with the IKEA aesthetic? Which of these are likely to resonate with customers? Competitive advantage. They're exploring 3D printing enabled approaches to fabrication. So that means doing it in a more agile way, doing it more flexibly, doing it closer to the customer. Productivity and efficiency. Right now in their warehouses, they have drones flying around taking inventory. They found from their experiments that drones never sleep, and they also are more accurate at taking inventory. And they're innovating with the customer experience. And so you can go on their website right now, upload a photo of your home or apartment. You can then it'll offer up recommendations and say, well, what about a chair here? What about a sofa? What about an end table? And eventually where this is headed is VR and AR enabled approaches. You put on your Oculus headset, you look around your apartment, and all of a sudden you can see a couch, an end table, a sofa, a bookcase, and it's offering up recommendations. You could see how they look live in your home or apartment. So they're moving from this to this. But what happens if they get really good at doing this really fast? Well, in that world, they don't start with the design. They don't start with design of one size fits all furniture. They start with the customer. They start with bespoke furniture designs that are built that the customer picks out live. They're able to, I mentioned, fabricate it very close to the customer in a modular and agile way. They can then deliver it in near real time. They can use trucks. I kind of like drones. And in that world, they no longer need the stores, the warehouses, all of those facilities, those big blue mazes that they're synonymous with. Now imagine you're competing with IKEA, except they don't have warehouses, they don't have inventory, they don't have store workers, they don't have the sort of overhead that you do. It becomes very hard to compete with them in that circumstance. And so finally, I'll end on this note and then open it up for a couple questions. I think everyone's talking about an AI mindset out there, and we're hearing a lot of talk about an AI first mindset. I think frankly, that's BS. I think it's not a mindset. It's about building capabilities. It's about your AI muscles. It's about building an AI roadmap. And that's really what I see companies doing right now, is thinking about, well, how do I build an AI roadmap? And what that means is looking at all the different projects that you could be engaging in across the organization, right? And basically figuring out, well, how do we prioritize them? And the way you prioritize them is by first assessing what's the cost and risk posed by them and what's the business value that they create. And then you put them on a 2x2 matrix, MBA style, where value is the y-axis, cost and risk is the x-axis. And you look in that top left-hand corner and you say, listen, what are the high value, low risk, low cost projects I could be engaging in right now to build off of these quick wins to show value to the organization? And then lining those up and saying, listen, we're going to engage in those projects first. But I mentioned to everyone, roadmap is a little bit of a misnomer. It's more like roadmaps, plural, because all companies I've engaged with, while they're doing these incremental productivity enhancements, they all have to clean up their data. And I've never worked with a company that didn't say, hey, we have data in decent shape, not great. We need to work on that data first. And so we do that simultaneously. Small wins while we improve and shore up the data. And eventually those data projects pave the way for more disruptive and visionary projects. And you can execute on those while you're still looking for the low-hanging fruit. And so I'll throw it up to questions, but I just want to call out that I love doing this and I love to make myself available. If any of this resonated and you wanted to grab some time with me, you can use that QR code in the top left-hand corner. It'll give you a 15-minute call. Happy to kind of talk through wherever you are and offer up any guidance or assistance that I can. 15 minutes could shape the next 15 years of your company's evolution. So with that, let me stop sharing. Hold on. And open it up for questions.
Well, Dr. Michael, thank you so much for that wonderful presentation. Great information. And yes, we do have a few questions that come in. And again, we welcome everybody to ask Dr. Michael some questions. So before I ask some questions for Dr. Michael, I do want to let everybody know we do have a global AI summit coming up next January 22nd. Again, there's a QR code here in the upper left-hand corner. Take advantage of that. And again, that's going to be from 9 to 2 o'clock East Coast time. Again, wealth of information. Great. All right, so we got our first question here, Dr. Hussman. I've been hearing a lot about AI lately, and again, it's in things like self-driving cars, facial recognition. But how is it really making an impact in everyday life? Well, you kind of shared a lot about that, but I guess maybe to reiterate to this individual's question.
Yeah. I mean, I tell everyone it is embedded in virtually if you go online, you are interacting with AI. If you're interacting, your email inbox, there is an unbelievable amount of AI in your phone. Your job, if you're working with, any number of applications like Google Docs or Word, like it's embedded in there and it's trying to learn about you. And so, and especially if you're on the web and you're, say, shopping online, like I think many of us do. So I think the point is, we've seen AI in the background for decades and decades. We're now starting to see it creep into the foreground, so that a tool like ChatGPT, it's not the background, it's the application you're engaging with, right? And so, it's almost hard to come up with an example because it's kind of everywhere, right? And it's surfacing ads and it's surfacing products and it's getting your products, everything to your front door faster and faster. So I'd say for Constantine, it's a great question, but just be cognizant of what are you doing on a day-to-day basis. There's AI everywhere in all of the things that you're interacting with.
Yeah, so true. And that, like you said, it's evolving even more and more. I mean, I could see it now. I'm actually learning from AI better than I've ever had before. I'm just so many things that I wasn't familiar with. I'm not saying I'm an expert, but I've learned a lot personally. Let me see if there's a. Go ahead. Oh, go ahead, Dr. Husband.
Yeah, and I'll add. So I'll just jump on the other question from Constantine, which I had to keep this short, so I couldn't cover. But Constantine, great question. Why is it suddenly everywhere? The truth is, if you know the Gartner hype cycle, that says we get really excited about technology, but it kind of falls flat, and it takes years for the technology to get robust enough that it has everyday applications and it's transformative. And so this is a great point I often make, which is, 20 years ago, we had AI, we got excited about Watson. What happened? It had some applications, but it didn't change the world. It didn't set it on fire. But in the background, we saw exponential growth in data, in hardware, and software, and in human capital. And now we're at the hockey stick portion of that curve. And so I have some graphs to support that. And I think I'm giving a talk later at the Glorium conference in January, and I can unpack this, but I didn't have time today. And I think it's a great question.
Well, there's another question from Constantine. He asked, what about industries outside of tech? Like, where do you see AI making the biggest difference next? Maybe in education or retail?
Yeah, I mean, I think those are great examples. I do a lot of work in life sciences and oil and gas, and you don't understand the amount of AI that goes into those industries is pretty amazing. So I see those as big opportunities. You mentioned education, and I completely agree. I think the education model, at least in the US, has been pretty static for decades, and I think we're due for some pretty massive transformations. And then you're 100% right. Retail is another great example where I think we're going to see a lot of change, not just e-commerce, which is obvious, but I'm working with companies that are trying to take the offline and bring it online. And that means I'm going to learn about you through customer, frequent like programs, like customer loyalty programs. And then I'm going to be really good about engaging with you and understanding where you've gone and when and what you've bought in order to tailor those product recommendations. So I think that's just a brief example. And then the other one I would say is any knowledge work. And think about it. There's knowledge workers everywhere, right? When you're talking to a lawyer, you're talking to a doctor, you're talking to a consultant, you're talking to a tax professional. Their jobs, let me be very clear, their jobs are going to get completely upended. And I think folks that are in those professions need to be very cognizant of the changes that are occurring.
Great. And then just one comment here from Benjamin. He said, completely agree with the insight that the application of AI is relatively simple with modern tooling, and the real challenge is in the change management and education for employees. Again, things that just have to evolve and become more frequent, tripping to people how to use it and prompt it correctly. I'm a firm believer if we learn how to prompt it correctly, it's going to really be a great asset to offset our or delegate the things that are mundane, and we can spend more time on the things that we are really good at. So I
totally agree. Yeah, that's the hard work that needs to be done. People think it's the technology. Anyone who's been doing, and Chris, I know you've got a long background in consulting and coaching, and like, no, it's always the people. We know this. It's always the people.
Absolutely. Well, let's see. Well, you just got a lot of kudos for just a wonderful presentation. People are looking forward to hearing you next January here coming up. That'll be, just a little over a month away. So Dr. Hausman, thank you so much for taking the time to serve us today with this wonderful presentation. And we hope everybody listening took away some action items that you could start looking into and where you are in your business and how you could use AI to your advantage.
That was great. Thanks all.
Thank you. And before we leave everybody, make sure you scan the code for Join the Summit, January 22nd. Again, that's a Wednesday. And again, we want to wish everybody a happy holiday season, and we'll see you next year in 2025.